Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Mass Effect Andromeda Insanity Difficulty video walkthrough. This is the second part of A Better Beginning, and we're entering into the Remnant Vault. So this game does some kind of arbitrary things, and I don't think it's the strongest aspect of it. I don't think it's inherently bad. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed exploring new planets and going into new systems. But essentially, every area that you go to has these vaults. These vaults are kind of the remnants of this remnant race. It is the technology that's left behind by these machines, by these world builders, and you will be exploring them, and you will be ultimately doing some fighting inside of them, and then doing perhaps a Sudoku space puzzle, or just pushing a button and then getting out of them. And this is kind of the meat of each of these planets. But you do the same thing in almost all of them. Architecturally, they all look like this, which is this combination of like a midnight blue and that cyany green lighting. Everything is, glyphy and shiny, and it's got a lot of vaulted ceilings with sharp, long, flowing bits of tech, concrete, whatever this architecture is. It looks like this all the time, and I don't think it looks bad. I just think it looks very specifically like this. And can you remember what most alien races in a lot of games kind of look like? It kind of looks like this. We seem to have this wholesale vision of what sophisticated precursor races, build like, and I kind of don't like it. It's miserable. It's kind of dank and grim, and to me, it doesn't feel like we're discovering anything because it's such a well-versed visual design. It reminds me of was it Iridian from Borderlands? How everything there was angular and lit like this. It reminds me of the shit in Destiny that look like this. It reminds me of a lot of stuff we've already done in Mass Effect that kind of looks like this. And I don't want to be super critical of the art and of the design because I think it looks fine. It looks like every fucking secret mystery species race that's ever existed ever in every video game. Because for some reason, this seems to be the go-to aesthetic for every new race, and I don't really understand it. I think the Remnants are the weakest part of the game, because they're just boring robots that all have this one duty, and they don't really look that interesting. I like to think the precursors, the world builders of civilizations, would look kind of fancy. Kind of interesting, kind of ridiculous. And I will take, all the secret palaces and the paradises and the cities of gold and stuff from Uncharted. I'll take those any day over something that looks like this because they looked interesting. This just looks insert generic space shit. This looks like the inside of a Borg ship, for all I care. Even though it doesn't, but you know what I mean. And that's the problem I think I had with the vaults. I found them to be kind of exhausting. From a personal perspective, they weren't bad. It was just go to this vault, hold Y on a bunch of these consoles that all look the same, that have this really nice rippling, crafting, moving cube kind of hexagon pattern, and then do a puzzle and do some fights against enemies that are kind of annoying. And that's what they all were. And there's some really nice planets on this game, Meridian? Meridian looks so cool. I love Meridian. It's this really fancy looking world and there's some great moments that happen on it. And then you come into one of these and it's just triangles and pyramids and look, this could be Total Recall for all we know. Everything always looks like this. Can you remember how in previous games there was asshole doors, and asshole doors were this epidemic of doors that opened like sphincters, and it was in everything, and I blame Halo for that. It's like that, how asshole doors became the preset for everything. Well, this is kind of the preset for sophisticated races. They're obsessed with hexagons. I don't know why. And flowing sharp lines. I mean, look at it. It's very this-y. Look at Bayonetta 2. This kind of looks like the aesthetic they had going in Hell in Bayonetta 2. It's such a well-versed vision. Maybe it was in an Escher painting and everybody copies him, but I don't know what it is. I've just spoke for 5 minutes about how I don't like the aesthetic. But to me, I find it very kind of plain and uninspired. one of the most interesting parts of this is the platforming and the environmental hazards, because it's different. And the jump is not the best. I think the jump in this game could have done with some work, but you can get used to it and it's not bad. It just doesn't feel good to do, in my opinion. And there are a few jumping moments where it's a bit awkward and gangly and it could have done with more work, but it's perfectly fine. That is a breacher. He exists to come close to you and tickle you, so don't let him do that. And another thing too, if you shoot sniper rifles from the hip, they do less damage, which I think is a good thing, but it's kind of annoying too. And the gun that I'm using is a gun that I found in the game. You can shoot it single shot, or you can hold the trigger and it fires a kind of inaccurate burst of rounds. And it's really interesting, but it's kind of a piece of shit too. I didn't like it too much. And that brings us to a questionable mechanic, number 1, which is weapon equipment. Or equipping weapons, probably a better way of saying that. So there's some strange choices in this game. For some reason, you can only have 3 skills hotkeyed at any time, and that's it. Gone is the Mass Effect Wheel of Doom, where you would cycle between abilities as they were on cooldown, and then when they were on cooldown, you'd use your team to use theirs, and it was just a massive biotic doom sphere. Those days are gone. I don't know why, but they've decided to not let you directly control your team. It's preposterous to me. You can tell them to shoot things, you can tell them to move to places, but you can't tell them what abilities to do. So you can't do the combos with your team like you could in the old games and feel like you had any measure of control. The game says that when you target somebody who's susceptible to being, comboed, that the AI will use their combo moves to finish the combo for you and vice versa. I've not seen much evidence of this. I've seen times when they've done it, I've seen times when they haven't. The only thing that remains is that Mass Effect was better when you had control over your team. I don't know why they changed it, I can't get behind it, because to me, Mass Effect is your team. It's about using your team intelligently, it's about everybody complementing each other and coming up with these big series and these sequences of macros that culminate in epic doom. That's what playing Mass Effect always was to me, because I was a boring-ass soldier. My build on Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3 was a soldier build, so I had every weapon sticking out of my orifices, and I didn't have a lot of spells, but my team did, and I used my team to compensate for the fact that I couldn't drop barriers and drop armor effectively, but they could. So they got it down, and I dealt the damage, and it was a really nice relationship, and it's how I always played the games. You can't really do that in this, which is disappointing, because it doesn't feel like Mass Effect when they take that away. But even weirder so, you can equip a certain amount of weapons, but you can't equip outside of very specific moments. So at the beginning of a mission, you're given your equipment that you enter the mission with, and that's what you use. Your inventory space counts everything, and it's actually quite strict. It counts resources, consumables, not resources, sorry, it counts the consumables that I never use, that I was taking in and filling my inventory with. Oh, by the way guys, if you come up here, you can hack this turret, and it will make this next firefight much easier. Because there's a bunch of observers, and the observers are bastards. Additionally, the cover in some of these zones is destructible. One of those things that's nice to have, but I don't think it feels very Mass Effect-y. I like the idea that the combat has been designed so that the enemies constantly put pressure on you from creative angles, because it forces you to move. The reason why they've given you that really powerful dash ability is because of how the combat flows now. The combat is much more aggressive, it's less safe, and it's less about sitting behind your safe's wall firing abilities at people. So now, you've got to move, and whenever you move on these games, you're vulnerable, and on Insanity, you're super vulnerable. So it adds to this wonderful ballet of positioning that the combat is. So it makes a lot of sense. But the destructible environments kinda don't. And I think it's because it's the automatic cover as well. There's some stuff you can't take cover behind because the game doesn't register it correctly, whereas there's other stuff you can. So, because the cover system doesn't feel like it saves you all that often, it feels like it's a pain in the ass more than anything. To have the cover then be destroyed when you found something that actually works, kind of works doubly against the player. And it leads to these moments of, why is it doing this? But you will get a general feel for what can be destroyed and what can't be, and you'll learn what pieces of cover to go behind, because they generally are the bigger things that don't take any damage, and they're the ones you want to use. So intelligent cover usage is actually a bit of a skill, I guess. But as I was saying, the inventory system is kind of cruel in how it's counted, because it measures every piece of body glitter you've got on and then costs you something for it. So because of how strict everything is that's counted against you when you're carrying it, you would think equipping would be easier, right? Because what's the point in having a bunch of weapons on your character if you can't change between them? There's no point, so what's the point in bringing them? And it's one of those things that you've got to discover by playing. And then I noticed, you know when you see a weapon in a pickup crate, you can press Y and equip it. So if you find a weapon, right, you can equip it freely without having to start a mission from the beginning or go to a specific loadout chamber. Yet when you're standing around with 20 weapons sticking out of your ass, you can't go into your little, equipment person and swap them out and equip them? Why? I can pick up a random weapon and equip it instantly, but I can't swap between the equipment that I have. And I was thinking to myself why they would do this. And immediately I always go to the same thing as the powers. They've done it so that you specialise. They've done it so that you can't be a one-trick pony that can do everything and just be a super overpowered, scrub to your build. But it's not true. Because you can swap between your powers, you can even swap between your preset powers. So if you don't want to be a Sentinel and you need a bonus in your guns, you can swap to a soldier in a menu outside of any kind of loadout specific moment. So the build that is the foundation of your skills can be swapped on the fly at any point, but your guns can't. How does that make sense? Like, if you wanted to be super anal in this game, you could go into your menu in response to what's happening in the game and swap between your skill so that you get the maximum benefit for what you're doing. Do you have a really good gun? Go into your menu, pop soldier on, shoot 2 hits, start reloading in your menu, put Sentinel back on for the defense because you're vulnerable. Soon as your gun's loaded, back in the menu, swap back to soldier, get that damage bonus. Ooh, your moves have recharged. Swap to biotic, use your move, swap back to soldier. You could do that. It'd be a fucking nightmare because the menus aren't great. But you would think that if that's a possibility, why didn't they give us a fast swap so that we could completely micromanage everything and make it feel good? And if they're going to let us change such a fundamental foundation, then who the fuck was it that forgot to let us change weapons? Because it seems so baffling. My guy didn't grab. I'm an expert player, guys. But do you see what I mean? It seems like such a strange, counterintuitive process. If we can go super anal with our abilities, which you would think the game would make you pick and commit to rather than doing everything, yet the guns it doesn't let you. And the guns are something that have never been bound to the builds. Because if you think about it, in the previous Mass Effects, there was affinity towards weapons. If you remember on Mass Effect 1, when you first tried to use weapons that you didn't have the skills for, the gun aimer wavered everywhere. Like, try picking up a sniper rifle on Mass Effect 1 without any sniper skill. The gun just will not sit still, and it makes aiming a challenge, but the better you get with the rifle, and it makes a lot of sense. They got rid of that in later Mass Effects for a more, ubiquitous third-person shooter experience, so a lot of those important aspects of skills with the weapons were less important. On this game, you can use every weapon, but you don't have the ability to swap between them, so it seems like they've fucked it up. It seems like it's a mistake. So it brings me to the only thing I can think of on top of the whole committing, even though committing is redundant when they let you swap between Sentinels and biotics on the fly, which is balance. Maybe they don't want you swapping to the best weapon for every situation, but isn't that the point of the game? Understanding what makes you strong and what makes them weak, and then using it accordingly? Because in a lot of modern games, we're obsessed with this idea of 2 weapons. 1 weapon, 1 side weapon, and then you swap between the 2. And they limit it because it's a game balancing thing. It's the way games are balanced now, and that's what makes it work. But then you remember a few years before that, when you had these epic weapon wheels with 30 different guns on each of them, and there was a gun for every wonderful occasion. And it enabled you to have these specific setups to maximise ammo, and you would rotate between the guns so that you always had a choice and always had an option. And it was a way of playing the games well, because you knew what worked on what didn't, and everything had a specialist use, or some kind of gimmick that enabled it to be useful. That's what a good RPG is. A good RPG is a lot of choice, but only few sequences where that choice makes sense. so that everybody has a different tool for a different situation, because they all have a measure of viability, but there are some that work better than others. This game doesn't feel like it has anything like that, and it has a few moments that just make it feel bizarre because it could have. So I don't really understand why they limit that stuff so much. From an inventory perspective, where everything is measured, do you know the mods you don't have on your weapons? All of those are counted towards your weight. So if you ever get to the point where you can't pick anything up on a world, it's because you've got 50 weapon mods for guns you're not even using. Why does it weigh that shit when we can't swap between guns? I don't get it. It seems like a vast oversight. And it's a shame, because there's a lot of guns in this game. And when you've got... there must be 30 weapons, easily. About 10 plus on each tree. When you have that kind of diversity in your arsenal, why wouldn't you want the player to have a bunch of different tools? Like, you can buy perks to carry 5 guns, I think, which is good, but you can't equip weapons and change them to the situation. What if you don't know what you're facing? What if you've brought the worst possible setup? Being able to swap between weapons is what makes RPGs fun. It's what makes higher level play possible, because you can look into, oh, this has a special ability that does this. Ooh, this is a situation where that'll work. Swap to that. Take that off until that moment occurs. That's what great deep gameplay comes from. It comes from simple things having purposes and being utilised correctly. And you're never going to get that with this, because you're just going to put that Ket shotgun on that kills everything really fast, or whatever powerful combination you use, and use that. And of course, there's always the possibility that you can change weapons, and then I've not found the area that you do it on when you're in mission. Because let's face it, the menus have never been Mass Effect's greatest strength, and these ones are no different. They're kind of clunky, and it takes 3 clicks to do 1 click's worth of work. But I don't think I've missed it. And it just seems like something that would make the game more interesting as a player. Because it would breed more creativity. But that's something I've not spoken about, so let's talk about that as I mess with these. And I'm going to do something weird here. Watch this. You see what happened just then? I was very confused just then. I don't know what I did wrong, but I must have done something wrong, because I don't know what just happened. I know where I was supposed to go, and I decided to do that jump, and I landed on thin air, and it let me jump again. So I'm just going to go with it and say, yeah, there you go, guys. The game's weird. It's got problems. But here is another encounter with multiple observers, 3 observers, and that laser is constant DPS. But the moment you get the shield off, start hitting with biotics, and you should be okay. Some cover tricks for you too. When you're in a piece of cover like this, you can shoot through it. See that? This is what is known as optimum cover in this game, because you cannot take damage here, and you can get free hits on them. You can swap your shoulder with the right analog stick click, and you can do this on either side. Something I like to do a lot, but it's a little dangerous against stuff that does a lot of damage, is I like to back out of cover so that I'm not stuck against it, so I can move back and forth, and just be about just under like half a meter from me and the piece of cover, and shoot around it like that. And I feel like that's a much more confident position than using the cover, and it's because I can control it. The cover, I can't, because it's autonomous and it's terrible. There was a grenade, by the way. I don't know where that went, but I've got footage later on of Drax standing in that grenade for the full duration, and it doesn't do any damage to him because he's that strong. He's a nutter. But the melee choice in this game is something worth discussing, I think. You can pick a whole bunch of different weapons, each ones that have damage and all kinds of different fancy effects, and some of them look good and some of them look bad, and you can do a nice plunge attack from mid-air, which is kind of awkward, but it works. Some of the detection on it's not the best. The one that I recommend is the Cryo Fist. I'm using the first one that I get. I think I find it in this level, and I'm not going to upgrade it because I don't really need to, but you can if you want to. The reason I use it is because when you hit people, they freeze, and it knocks them over. And it's a great tool for getting space away from things that put pressure on you. And I didn't realise how good it was until I committed to using it in this walkthrough, and then I realised it was really, really powerful. Because if anything rushes you and it's really close and you're reloading, if you punch it once, you've got enough time to get away. And I know it sounds crazy, but trust me guys, check it out, it's actually pretty good. Same with any weapon that can make the enemy flinch. When you shoot an enemy in this game, For the most, they'll just take it unless it's a crit, and then sometimes they'll show signs that it did damage. But certain weapons cause flinch, and they cause like a bit of a knockback. If you can find out the weapons that do that knockback, you can consistently deal damage until your clip is empty, and then do some kind of stun with Overload or with a Biotic, and then you can get away, reload, and do it again. The shotguns are great for it. The shotgun that Drac is using is called like a Rosenad, or something like that. It only has, I think, 4 shells, but each of those shells stuns your opponents. So if you want a weapon that can stun lock, that's pretty good for it. The Vanquisher rifle stun locks as well, which is why that rifle is so powerful. And the Falcon can do it on certain enemies, where they get stunned from the explosion, but because it's got quite an interesting hit detection on it, and it no longer detonates on proximity like it used to, it's not as good, but it's still a decent choice. And then here we have some sprinting gameplay without my weapon being equipped, which I don't really like how this game feels when he puts his weapon away, so I normally always move with the weapon out. I find the movement to be too swimmy. There's not enough weight to it. But when you pull the gun out, it feels like Mass Effect again to me, so I much prefer it that way. And the game has these really pushy tooltips that continually tell you to put your weapon away when you've got it out. I prefer how the game feels and looks when I have my weapon out, so it's kind of frustrating that the game continually tells you that. I suppose it could be useful if you don't know it, but it definitely feels annoying. As I skip the gravity well again, and we run away from this cloud of death that never really kills you. You've got to really try hard for this to kill you, because I know I fucked about and it didn't kill me. But we get outside of the vault. We've now changed some of the atmosphere on Eos, and we're going to be called all the way back to the place that we defended at the beginning of the video. And there's going to be a fight where Drac is taking on a ton of Ket. And that was me fast travelling to it. This is the fight. So down here is where it's all going to kick off. You can either drive the car down, or you can jump down like I'm about to do. But you need to be aware of a few things, guys. This is a crazy, crazy fight, and this is really going to highlight how many enemies you have to kill in certain circumstances, and just how dangerous they can be when they flank you, and they're going to flank you. Some of the hardest fights on Andromeda are the fights where the cover's not the best, and you can't find a safe spot. This is kind of like that, only I'm going to put myself into some dangerous spots because I like being aggressive in this game. My opinion to you, if you're not that confident of a player, is to find good spots and find weapons that complement those spots, and just use distance. Distance is a lifesaver. On these videos, you're going to see me moving in a lot. You don't have to do this. I do this because I like to be aggressive, and I like to try and be exciting with how I choose to play. I don't necessarily have the weapons for it at the moment, but this is my favourite spot to be, where I've got a decent piece of cover, I know where the enemies are, and nothing's at my left or right yet. But that will change, because these enemies are not stupid, and one of our friends has just died. The good news, Drac is a beast in this spot, so there's a nice piece of cover to the left of where the Vanguard has died. Do you see those weird plinths coming out of the ground that have that tree next to them? You can sit up on a position in there, which is really good cover to overlook this area, and kill plenty of people. These enemies like to sit with their head out of cover like Kane and Lynch, so feel free to trephinate their craniums, and keep using your abilities. I cannot stress enough just how powerful the ability to do what I'm doing right now is. Launch them with pull, put some rounds into their body, and then send them flying with throw, or whatever combo finisher you want to use to get the different bonuses. It's such a powerful tool. And oops, sorry Drac. You know what I meant. All Krogans look alike to me, I'm a space racist. But where Drac is at the moment, to the left of him, that's the shelf you can stand on, and you can get cover behind those beams, and it's pretty good. There's also going to be a shuttle coming in here, which I wish showed up on the map, because I've been snuck up on by shuttles, and the shuttles always drop fun people. And don't try to spawn kill the shuttles, because for some reason sometimes they take damage, and other reasons they don't. So it's just a waste of ammo. But I push over here, and there's a bunch of people to the left. One of our team has just gone down. Here comes a Chosen rushing me. Be very careful. Someone's behind you, Chris. Come on, dude, get rid of him. There it is. Now we're going to send him away. We're going to try and finish him off, try and melee him. It didn't work. Boom, there's the throw. See you later. And now we're going to push back over here and get into cover. All of the choices Oh, here he comes. Look at him jogging towards me. That's what Anointeds do. When I said they're going to rush for you, that is a great example of exactly what I meant. Now we're in trouble. Now we need to get into a good place. This is the place I meant. Up here is fantastic cover to shoot over the entire battlefield. And if you don't want to get aggressive and be crazy like I kind of was a little bit, just come up here. And hopefully you've got better guns than I do, because it's kind of sad how little damage we're doing. But it's true of every Insanity run on every Mass Effect. The beginning is always the hardest, folks, because you don't have the tools for it. The moment we start having the tools is the moment that the challenge takes a nosedive, and it becomes a lot more manageable. But watch my life bar and watch my shield when I engage this Anointed. If he gets any clean hits on me, watch how quick my shield vaporizes. It's astronomical, it truly is. The team is dead too, so it's just me and Drac. We'll keep on putting stuff that way. The biotics, if you're not familiar, you have to aim them a little bit, but after a while, if it's close enough, they will do these wonderful wraparound animations and lock in on enemies and hit them for you. You can use that to kind of do a nice curling shot above cover that then slams down into cover and knocks them out. It's kind of a field. See it just then? You'll get your... That one just completely missed, which was unfortunate, so then I finish it off with the biotic instead. With the overload, sorry. It's all a feel, folks. If you're new to Mass Effect, spend a couple hours getting used to how they work and you'll be laughing. That guy's taking a few crits. We're running out of ammo. There's a sniper rifle. If you're wondering why I wasn't using the sniper a lot, the aim was fighting me. I felt it was really difficult to make the sniper move, and I was blaming myself, but it's not myself. It's the auto assist. It's too heavy. Oh, got him. Didn't kill him though, because it would have done the red X, so he's going to continue coming this way. But I thought that was a pretty fun fight, and that's the main strength of this game. The real strength of Mass Effect Andromeda, which is kind of a tough discussion to have because it has so many detriments, is definitely the combat and the exploration. Everything else can be debated because there's pros and cons, but the exploration and the combat are two areas where I think the game really epitomizes what the first Mass Effect was like. And I think it's funny that this is probably the weakest Mass Effect. I think it's easy to say that. But at the same time, I think it's probably the closest to Mass Effect 1. And in a lot of ways it's not, because it's been stripped down and refined and they've took away a lot of the choice. But if you remember, the first Mass Effect was a technical nightmare on consoles. It was choppy, it crashed, it had a whole host of problems. It had all the goofiness that this game has. And you put up with it because it was a great game in all those other ways. Whereas this game isn't so great in those other ways, but the combat is up there and the exploration feels like they finally nailed that formula of mystery, allure, and actual payoffs. I've seen a lot of people being really critical, saying that there's nothing on the worlds and that the planets are boring, it's just like No Man's Sky. And I don't get that at all. And that's coming from somebody who's been on every planet, on every Mass Effect game. I've searched them all, because there's something that I find inherently interesting about taking my squad, my team that I've grown to know over the course of the adventure, and exploring the stars with them. And I love it. I always have loved it. And I felt that enjoyment in this game. And at the beginning, I will be the first to admit, for the first few hours, it didn't feel Mass Effect-y at all. It felt kind of boring, kind of, coloured by numbers. There was nothing intriguing. I didn't care about any of the characters. The characters were boring. Everything that we were doing was kind of boring. It should have been fantastic and interesting, but the only thing I cared about was Clancy Brown's voice. Everything else was just kind of meh. But it gradually and consistently gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And by the time, I got to know PB a little bit more, and I found her quite interesting, and then Drac joined the crew, and I just love me some Krogans. And then we got to the point where, we got Jarl, and I really liked the Angarans and some of that, and we were on these different planets, and stuff was happening, and it felt like Mass Effect again. And I think that this game has a litany of problems, some true problems. I would never defend them. But there's also a lot of what made those old games great here. So a lot of the criticism is kind of intriguing to me. I think it's more of a personal bias than it's the game's fault, because I feel like people are being very critical. And I'm the critical guy. I'm normally the first person to jump on all the things and all what have you that's wrong and everything. And this game it's like low-hanging fruit. There's too many. It's so easy to pick the flaws in this. And that's kind of how I felt when I was playing. I know there's problems with this game. They're obvious. But mechanically, the most egregious stuff to me is none of the shit that people are talking about. Admittedly, the writing's not the best. Some of the characters are a nightmare. They're boring. They're wordy. And like the sister thing. The entire game wants you to forge a relationship with a sister that I never visited. So at the end of the game, when it forced me on her, it was like a stranger. And in this walkthrough, as a joke, I've made my sister Chinese. That's how distanced she is from me. She's not even the same race. It's ridiculous. But that, to me, is one of the worst parts. Like, the story is not the best, but there's parts of it that are nice. The characters are not the best, but some of them are interesting and some of the plots are cool. The planets, I like the planets a lot. You know, there's something about them that I really like. The vehicle, it's kind of shit, but I like it. There's all these stuff you can stick on the vehicle to make it better, but none of them is a fucking gun, which is the one thing I want to stick on it, to make it better. Like, there's so many things can be said of the shortcomings of this game, but I think we're talking too much about the sins, because there's a lot of virtues that are getting ignored because it's so easy now to just drag it down. And this is coming from somebody who likes to believe himself quite a Mass Effect fan. This is not a terrible game. It's a weak Mass Effect in a lot of ways, but it also has great Mass Effect moments. And if you're a real fan and you give it a chance, at least beat the story before you beat this into the ground, because then you can say that you didn't like it and you've got a good groundings as to why. But don't just be somebody who's looking at the lip syncing, which is awful, looking at the eyes, which are dead and cold and they make you feel weird inside. Like, judge it for its merits and then list the myriad of problems, because the problems are so evident they don't even need voicing. The cover system is worse than any of the technical bugs, any of them, because it affects the gameplay 100%, and you can't control it. Bad frame rate is something you can adjust to. Bad cover system is harder to adjust to than bad frame rate, because it's life or death. And on Insanity, it's usually death.